Hello, my name is Rachel Berg, and I'm here to talk to you about the edTPA. Specifically, I'm going to be talking to you about the 7 different tips to help you through surviving the edTPA, pretty much. We all know the edTPA can be a pretty daunting task, and it can be pretty challenging at times. So these are just some things that I wish I knew, or things that helped me when I was working through the edTPA. So first things first is number 1. This is probably the most important one, just because reading and rereading your handbook is going to give you the most information about the edTPA. So first things first, you should read your edTPA handbook. Every single edTPA, no matter what subject you're doing it in or grade level, comes with its own specific handbook. And everything you will need to know about submitting, what you need to include in your videos, what you need for task 1, 2, 3, and 4 if you are taking a childhood edTPA or a childhood special ed edTPA. Everything you need to know about those things is in that handbook. So take your highlighter, highlight all the important information that you need, and ingrain it in your brain. That'll be really important. And you can also use those highlight marks as references if you need to go back and look at things, just so you know like the key points to look for. And number 2 is send out your video permission slips early, and so you can get them signed. And always have extras on hand. We know sometimes our students can misplace permission slips, and that's totally fine, so make sure you have some on hand, but send them out early so that you have an adequate amount of time to get them all in. So sometimes you could send your permission slip a week before you're going to film, and you can only get 5 permission slips back. So make sure you send them out early, so that way when the time comes to film your learning segment, you have the necessary permission to videotape students. And if you don't get a permission slip back from a student, or a parent or guardian decides they don't want their student in the video, which is totally okay, you just need to make sure that they are outside of the view of the camera when you are videotaping. Number 3 is to start early, or as early as possible. I know the first 1 or 2 weeks of student teaching is just you kind of getting your foot in the door, learning the routine, establishing relationships with students, and that's totally fine. But once you kind of get over that sort of initial coming into the classroom, and you start teaching, you should start working on your learning segment and your recordings and things like that. Just so you have enough time to make any necessary changes, to tweak some things if you need to, or to even, rewrite your entire learning segment if you feel that's necessary. Also, I suggest to film every single lesson that you include in your learning segment, just so you kind of have like your pick of the litter of what you want to choose from to submit for your task 2, which is your instruction. Yeah, and also make sure, like I said, read the handbooks, because in the task 2 section, it has specifics for what they want you to include in the video. It would just stink if you filmed a really great video and then you went back to start working on the edTPA after you were done student teaching, and then you realize you didn't record and you didn't get the necessary things that they asked for in the video. So just be proactive, read the handbook, and start early. Number 4 is to collect more data than you need. This will be really helpful just in case you feel, so you can always have extra. You sometimes you think, oh, the less is better, but in this case, to have more and to be able to choose from what you want is better. And also, I highly suggest, as soon as you're done grading your learning segment assessments, photocopy them with the comments that you wrote on them and your grade that you gave them, and photocopy them immediately, and then hand back the original copies to the students once you get the grades in. And that way you have all of the copies for your student data, for like the whole class data that you need to include in task 3. And then also you have student work samples that they require of you as well. So so that's number 4. Number 5 is to compare all of your work with the commentaries, to compare all your work with the rubrics that are in the handbook. So the handbook is basically compiled with a bunch of these rubrics based on different sections of your edTPA. And they score you from 1 to 5, 1 being not so great and 5 being exceptional. So your goal is to aim for 4s and 5s. So read through your edTPA, a couple times. And then if you're scoring within the 1 to 3 range, you should really consider adjusting things as needed, so you can hit the 4 and 5 point mark. And then number 6 is give yourself a deadline and stay on top of it. If your school, like if your college that you're working in your teacher preparation program doesn't have a deadline for you to do the edTPA by, it's really great to set your own self deadline, because if you don't set your own deadline, it can result in a loss of motivation. You can just say, I have other important things to do besides this. But giving yourself a deadline at a reasonable time, maybe a couple weeks to finish it, really helps you stay motivated and on top of things. And it also will allow you to become certified quicker. So if you have the edTPA done and all of your other certification exams done by the time you graduate, it's really convenient for schools that are looking to hire teachers who are already certified by the month of May or June. So definitely keep that in mind. And my last tip for you for the edTPA is number 7, and that is to double check everything before you submit. When you submit the edTPA, it has you upload different files to different locations. So you need to make sure that your specific file is in the right location, because if your assessment commentary is where your planning commentary should be, they're not going to score it and you're going to get a fail. So just make sure you put everything where it needs to be, and also reread everything before you submit. Here's a tip for reading if you feel like you sound like you're not making any sense, is to read out loud. I know this really helps me when I'm writing papers and things like that. So read your commentaries out loud, and try to see if it makes sense verbally. And if it doesn't make sense verbally, then it's not going to make sense when another person's reading it. Another tip is you can also have a peer read it. I suggest someone who has already passed the edTPA. They could be really helpful in picking out what the scorers for the edTPA are looking for. But yeah, so those are the 7 tips for surviving the edTPA, and I wish you all the best on your edTPA and working towards your goals.